There's a specific kind of silence that happens when someone finds out you're not on Instagram. A slight tilt of the head, like you just told them you don't own a microwave or a front door. And then comes the question, almost always exactly the same one. Wait, why not? Maybe you've been on the receiving end of that look before. Maybe you're the one who asked it. Because there's something genuinely fascinating about the person who just completely opted out. The person who watched the whole elaborate performance get set up, looked around at everyone putting on their costumes and went, I think I'll sit this one out. What is actually going on psychologically with those people? The lazy explanation is that they're just antisocial or technophobic or out of touch. But that theory falls apart incredibly fast when you look at who they actually are. A lot of them are deeply social, warm human beings. Many of them are actually online all the time, just not there. They're deep in forums about things they genuinely care about, or watching 40-minute videos on YouTube. The absence of Instagram specifically seems to be a very considered position, rather than an oversight. So, let's actually pull that apart and look at what your brain is doing when it decides to walk away.
To understand the person who opts out, you first have to look at what Instagram is as a psychological environment. Strip away the branding and the color gradients, and what you have is an arena built almost entirely around visual self-presentation.
Every single design decision is quietly asking you the same question on a loop. How do you look to other people right now? The grid, the disappearing stories, the highlight reels, the follower counts sitting right at the top of the profile page. All of it creates an architecture where the self is treated as a product to be managed, updated, and reviewed. For a lot of people, holding that question in their head every day is genuinely exhausting. This is highly consistent with what psychologists call self-determination theory.
The model identifies autonomy, the feeling that your actions come from your own internal values, as a core human need. When a platform's entire reward system is built on external metrics, it creates a chronic, low-level conflict for the brain. Every like, every story view, and every follower gained is an external token. And if your internal reference point has stabilized, your brain starts to treat those tokens as noise rather than nourishment. It's why many non-users are still perfectly comfortable on platforms like Facebook or YouTube. Facebook functions more like a messy community bulletin board. It has groups and events, but the grid aesthetic isn't the primary architecture.
YouTube rewards pulling information inward to satisfy a specific curiosity or depth. Instagram, by design, demands that you broadcast an image of yourself outward and wait for a grade.
The person who stays off it hasn't lost their desire to connect. They've just looked at that specific visual grading scale and decided the math doesn't work in their favor. If you've ever actually hit the delete button, you know it doesn't immediately feel like peace. It feels like an itch. I remember talking to someone who walked away from a highly followed account after 5 years of daily posting. They told me the hardest part wasn't missing their friends. It was this strange phantom reflex that happened whenever they saw something beautiful. A patch of perfect sunlight on a coffee cup, a quiet street at dusk, a funny moment with the dog. Their hand would literally reach into their pocket to grab the phone before their conscious brain could stop it. The brain had been trained to instantly convert a private moment into public currency. Without the app, the moment just hung there in the air, unrecorded and unshared. And at first, that feels incredibly lonely, like you're dropping a stone down a well and never hearing it hit the bottom. But if you stay in that discomfort long enough, something shifts. The sunlight on the cup stops being a draft for a story. It just becomes a cup of coffee you get to drink while it's still hot.
That phantom reflex isn't just an individual habit. It's a structural feature of how the brain processes data. Every time you scroll through a feed, your brain isn't just looking at pictures. It is running an ongoing, automated audit of your own life. Am I doing enough? Is my apartment too small? Why does that person look so rested at a Tuesday lunch? Psychologists refer to this mechanism as upward social comparison.
It's the chronic, often completely unconscious process of measuring your ordinary backstage reality against everyone else's highly curated highlight reels. Researchers have mapped the toll of this specific psychological tax quite clearly.
A 2024 study analyzing over 1,000 adult participants found that individuals using Instagram for more than 3 hours a day showed significantly higher self-criticism scores than those who used it for less than an hour.
This wasn't just true for teenagers. The pattern held firmly across every single adult age group. The constant exposure to idealized images acts as a steady drip of negative reinforcement for the nervous system. When people opt out of the platform, they rarely describe it using clinical terms. They will usually just say something casual like, "I just didn't enjoy the energy," or "It made me feel a bit weird." But what they're actually articulating, without the academic vocabulary, is the relief of lifting that cognitive load. They've simply cut off the supply of daily data points that their brain was using to criticize their own existence. There is, however, a very real side effect to this choice that people don't talk about enough. A particular kind of person leaves the platform and then, somewhat embarrassingly, finds that they actually miss it. Not the app itself, or the interface, or the ads, but the feeling of being witnessed. The quiet comfort of knowing that people you went to school with or worked with 10 years ago vaguely know what you're up to. They know you got a new job, or moved across the country, or bought a house. That is a deeply human psychological need, and for all its flaws, Instagram met it with incredible efficiency. When you delete it, you step into a world where your milestones happen in the dark. If you don't send a direct text to someone, they simply don't know what happened. The people who stay off the platform permanently aren't superhuman. They've just made a very conscious trade-off. They've accepted that their life will have a much smaller audience in exchange for ensuring that the audience they do have is actually paying attention. They've traded wide validation for deep recognition. And they've decided the smaller circle feels more stable. This trade-off between going wide and going deep isn't just an emotional theory. It is backed by the largest social science experiments ever conducted. When people claim they feel better after walking away, the immediate counterargument is that it's just the placebo effect, or a trendy hot take. But researchers have looked at what happens mechanically to the human nervous system when you completely cut the feed. The largest experimental study on social media abstention was conducted in partnership with Meta, involving over 35,000 real participants. The data revealed that deactivating platforms like Instagram or Facebook for just 6 weeks led to massive, measurable improvements in self-reported happiness. It simultaneously caused a significant drop in clinical scores for both anxiety and depression. What makes these numbers so remarkable isn't just the sheer scale of the study. It's the fact that Meta, an institution with zero financial incentive to prove that their product causes psychological distress, participated in running the numbers. The neurological mechanism behind this shift is relatively straightforward. It is a full reset of your baseline dopamine triggers. When you remove the constant anticipation of notifications, story views, and digital validation, your brain stops running hot. The attention residue that builds up from switching between 12 different profiles every hour begins to clear out. The brain stops scanning for external confirmation of its own worth and drops back down into its natural resting state. The non-user isn't fixing a broken brain, they're just returning an overstimulated nervous system back to its factory settings. Choosing to stay off Instagram isn't a badge of moral superiority, and it isn't an act of rebellion. It's just a quiet choice to let your life stay yours. To have a slow morning, a great dinner, or a bad day without needing to package it up and hand it over to an audience of 300 acquaintances. If you're someone who runs hot, who notices everything, processes deeply, and finds it hard to step away from the constant notice, It's usually a sign that your nervous system needs intentional structure, not more input. To help with that, I put together a set of 7-day actionable guides specifically focused on sleep, mental clarity, and dopamine regulation. The link is right below in the description and pinned in the top comment. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next upload. I'll see you in the next video.